Dave Weigel talked to Representative Veronica Escobar, who opposed the Lake and Riley Act, about why so many Dems helped pass it. Some interesting answers. Misinformation has predictably become the catch-all scapegoat for an excuse for not performing the basic tasks of politics. The invention of lying in 2007 has had a devastating and unprecedented impact. Okay, so let me give you the short and sweet of it, okay? The Lake and Riley Act. It is an anti-immigration bill, okay? The Slate wrote about it. Said this new immigration bill that's about to pass is a horrifying Trojan horse. Congressional Democrats are suddenly falling over themselves to endorse the Lake and Riley Act, handing Republicans a major victory in their crackdown on immigration before Donald Trump even takes office. GOP lawmakers prioritized the bill this session, pitching it as an urgent revision to ensure America's streets are safe from illegal immigrants who have been convicted of crimes. It would, in this telling, mandate the detention of undocumented immigrants who commit theft, ostensibly to prevent them from moving on to worse offenses. The act, which originates as a Republican messaging bill to condemn President Joe Biden's border policies, has already sailed through the House of Representatives with bipartisan approval and advanced debate in the Senate on Thursday by an 84-9 vote. This cross-party support might create the impression that this legislation really is what Republicans claim, a common-sense fix to broken system that will keep undocumented criminals off the streets. But that is a gross mischaracterization. Rather, the Lake and Riley Act would impose sweeping changes to the immigration system that raise serious constitutional concerns. Serious constitutional concerns. Now, of course, if you think the Supreme Court's going to do anything about it, well, guess what? They're not going to do anything about it. It would penalize immigrants who live and work in the U.S. legally, subjecting them to indefinite detention without being convicted or even charged with a crime. And it would transfer a massive amount of power to state attorneys general and district court judges who could effectively wrest control over immigration enforcement from the executive branch. These judges could, upon a state's request, ban the issuance of all visas to residents of entire countries like India. In short, under the guise of punishing a small number of law-breaking undocumented immigrants, the act would curtail legal immigration and subject law-abiding immigrants to detention and deportation. It is baffling that so many Democrats would sign on to such a cruel and constitutionally dubious scheme. It is not actually shocking that Democrats would sign on to it, because they are also racist. Anyway, here it is.
The Lake and Riley Act has passed the U.S. House of Representatives. The legislation requires law enforcement to detain people who are in the country illegally who commit theft-related crimes. The bill is in response to the murder of 22-year-old Lincoln Riley. Right now, 26-year-old Jose Ibarra is serving life in prison without parole for killing Riley last February. It happened while she was out for a run on UGA's campus. ICE says Ibarra entered the country illegally in 2022. Records show Athens police cited him for shoplifting in October of 2023 before letting him go. The bill passed the House 216 to 48. You're taking a look at the breakdown of all of Georgia's 14 representatives and how they voted. You can see this vote is split down party lines, except for Democratic Representative Lucy McBath, who voted with Republicans. And
yeah. Anyway, Republicans have championed the Lake and Riley Act by trumpeting the tragic story of its namesake, a 22-year-old nursing student who was murdered by a man who entered the country without authorization. They cynically framed the killing as a part of a migrant crime wave, which Donald Trump seized upon his presidential campaign. In reality, this crime wave does not exist. Undocumented immigrants are significantly less likely than American-born citizens to commit crimes of all kinds, including violent offenses. And the federal government already has the power to detain and deport undocumented immigrants who break the law. GOP leaders, nevertheless, have fast-tracked the bills as if it were an overdue solution to a pressing problem. And by rushing its passage, they have obscured profoundly troubling features buried in the bill's text. The first of these glossed over details is the fact that the Lake and Riley Act would not only target undocumented immigrants convicted of crimes of theft, as its sponsors assert. You can simply be suspected as an undocumented migrant or any migrant whatsoever, someone who is not a natural born U.S. citizen, as being suspected of committing a crime. You don't have to be charged. You don't have to be convicted. You can be suspected of committing a crime, and they can have permanent detention powers over you. It would also apply to those who are charged but never convicted, as well as those who are arrested but never charged. An individual who's mistakenly arrested because of a police officer's own error would therefore be ensnared by the law. So would a person who is wrongfully arrested because of racial profiling, prosecutorial malice, or other unconstitutional motives. The same is true of a person who faces charges that are later dropped. Under the act, the government must detain all these individuals without bond, punishment that is difficult to square with due process. It is not difficult to square with due process. It is exactly the opposite of due process. This is unconstitutional, but it doesn't matter. Although it is unconstitutional, it literally does not matter because you're doing it against a politically appropriate target, migrants, okay? And secondly, what are you going to do? Take it up to the Supreme Court? You think the Supreme Court cares about defending the Constitution? This is yet another implementation of Nazi Germany style anti-migrant initiatives, okay? This is straight up how it happens. I keep repeating this point over and over again to people. This is how it happens. This is how it happened. It's happening right now. Wake up. And people think, oh, you're wrong. The second detail is the act's startling scope. It does not only apply to undocumented immigrants, but also to people who live and work in this country legally. As immigration attorney David Isaacson has explained, the law would clearly apply to dreamers who are authorized to reside here, at least for now. It would also apply to refugees who enter the country without permission, but have since been granted asylum. And due to a quirk in federal law, it would even apply to legal immigrants who leave and re-enter the country while awaiting issuance of their green card. Finally, the act applies to minors who are arrested or charged with a crime, despite Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego's false claim to the contrary. Under this legislation, an 11-year-old asylum seeker whose parents brought him into the country without authorization would be forced into mandatory detention if he were arrested for swiping a candy bar. ICE warns Laken Riley Act could force it to release detained migrants. Yeah, it's because federal immigration officials are warning Congress that it could require detention for 60,000 people needing billions of dollars and thousands more detention beds to comply. Because there would be so much more need. And you know who else? You know who is going to be excited at this prospect, salivating? GEO. There was a intercepted, I believe, like quarterly earnings call that GEO made, the GEO group made, okay, where they were talking about how fantastic it is that this is their opportunity to rise up, okay? Hold on, let me see if I can find it. I mean, there's this, but...
Those are moving higher after Trump's victory in the U.S. Presidential election. And
for those of you who do not know, GEO is a private for-profit prison company, okay? And they had an earnings call where they talked about, in the aftermath of the Trump election, in the aftermath of the Trump victory, there was a conversation that they had, the presentation that they delivered, where they talked openly, and I wonder if we can find it, where they talked openly about how there's gonna be need for so many additional beds, so many additional detention facilities, and that the Trump administration will have to work with them.
And higher by a lot. GEO Group is up some 41%, Core Civic up 29%. And what caught my eye this morning was a note from Isaac Boltansky over at BTIG on this topic. And he said, I didn't realize this, some of the activities of ICE and Border Patrol in this country are already outsourced to these prison companies. They operate detention centers at the border. And so Boltansky's thinking was, that if the Trump administration has what he says a far more aggressive stance on border enforcement, that would impact the ICE business lines at these firms.
So another Trump trade is what we have here, right?
Effectively, yes.
And GEO Group, by the way, has had,
I mean, the stock is up crazy.
What a run.
Yeah.
What a run. What a run. Where is it, man? I wish I could find that conversation, dude. But yeah, they're very excited at all the concentration camps that they will be building in order to keep up with the extra demand. During a recent corporate earnings call, GEO Group CEO Brian Evans estimated that his company could make as much as $400 million annually by filling empty or underutilized beds at existing detention facilities to support what he called the future needs for ICE and federal government, referring to the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. They also openly, this is just the earnings call transcript. I think this was it. Yes. They also talk about, like, you can hear it. They also openly talk about how, like, they were built for this moment.
Call it the Trump trade for mass deportations.
They will carry out the largest deportation operation of criminals in American history.
Shares of GEO Group and Core Civic rose more than 50% since the election. The private prison companies say they're ready to detain more undocumented immigrants. GEO Group said after its latest earnings that it's well positioned to more than double the number of detainee beds from over 13,000 now to potentially over 31,000 in the future. It also said it could scale up its monitoring programs for migrants, like case management apps and GPS trackers, from 182,000 now to millions of people.
The GEO Group was built for this unique moment.
This is it. This is what I was looking for. The GEO Group was built for this unique moment
In our country's history, and the opportunities that it will bring.
The company did not respond to our request for comment on expansion. Wall Street analyst Brian Violino says Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, could bump up their business.
There's generally an expectation that there will be a significant increase in the amount of beds.
This is actual Nazi Germany, man. Straight up. I'm just letting y'all know. Anyway, going back to the Laken-Riley Act, though, the third detail, and perhaps the most alarming one, involves the Laken-Riley Act's extraordinary reallocation of powers to states and federal courts, as the Supreme Court has confirmed too many times to count. The Constitution assigns primary responsibility for immigration enforcement to the executive branch. Both Congress and the court have long recognized presidents' prosecutorial discretion to prioritize the removal of certain undocumented immigrants over others in light of the practical impossibility of deporting them all. The act would upend that balance by empowering states to seek federal court orders, overruling the executive branch's individual immigration decisions, and imposing mandatory detention in individual cases. And that is where we are. We are absolutely gutting what remains of constitutional protections for people in this nation, all at the behest of launching the ridiculous, violent, bloody affair of empire